Michael stood in the doorway, his jaw clenched so tightly that the muscles in his face twitched. His tailored navy suit looked as flawless as ever, but his eyes were filled with something I had never seen before, panic. Sarah instinctively stepped in front of me. "What do you want?" she asked calmly. Michael ignored her. He stared directly at me. "Dad," he said through gritted teeth, "we need to talk." Alone. I slowly stood from my chair, wincing as pain shot through my side. "Anything you have to say," I replied quietly, "you can say in front of your sister." His eyes flashed toward Sarah. "This doesn't concern her." Sarah folded her arms. "It concerns me if you're here after abandoning him." The room fell silent. Emily walked in from the kitchen, drying her hands with a towel. She froze the moment she saw Michael. "You have a lot of nerve showing up here," she said. Michael took a deep breath, trying to regain control. "I'm not here to fight." "No," Sarah replied. "Then why do you look like you're about to explode?" He hesitated. Finally, he reached into his leather briefcase and placed a thick envelope on the coffee table. "I need Dad to sign these." No one touched the envelope. "What is it?" I asked. "Just paperwork." Sarah picked it up before he could stop her. She opened it. Her expression changed instantly. "You've got to be kidding me." "What?" I asked. She handed the papers to me. My hands trembled as I read the title. Property Transfer Agreement. Michael wanted me to transfer ownership of my home to him. Even after everything. Even after refusing to help save my life. I looked up slowly. "You came here from my house." "It's not like that." "It looks exactly like that." He rubbed his forehead impatiently. "Dad, just listen." "I'm listening." "My company is negotiating a massive expansion. The bank wants additional collateral. If you transfer the house temporarily, it'll help finalize the deal." Sarah laughed in disbelief. "You told your own father there wasn't enough money for his cancer surgery, but now you need his house." "It's business." "No," Sarah snapped. "It's greed." Michael's voice rose. "You don't understand how the corporate world works." "I understand loyalty," she answered. "Something you clearly don't." He turned toward me again. "Dad, please. This benefits everyone." "How?" "When the deal closes, I'll transfer everything back." Emily shook her head. "You already proved your word means nothing." Michael's patience vanished. "I've worked 20 years to build my company. And your father worked 40 years to build this home," Emily replied. Silence. Michael looked around the modest living room. The old wooden shelves. The faded family photographs. The worn sofa where we had celebrated birthdays for decades. His expression softened for only a second. Then his phone rang. He answered immediately. "What?" His confident face slowly drained of color. "What do you mean the investors pulled out?" Another pause. "No. That's impossible." He turned away from us. "I'll be there in 30 minutes. He hung up without another word. His hands shook. "What happened?" I asked. He didn't answer. Sarah did. "They found out." Michael glared at her. "Found out what?" She looked directly into his eyes. "They found out what kind of man you are." For the first time in years, Michael had no comeback. He grabbed the envelope, stuffed it back into his briefcase, and walked toward the door. Just before leaving, he stopped. Without turning around, he asked quietly. Did the surgery really almost fail?" No one spoke. Finally, I answered. "The doctors said if we'd waited another week, I wouldn't be here." His shoulders sank. He nodded once. Then he walked out. None of us noticed that his expensive briefcase had accidentally been left behind beside the sofa. And inside that briefcase was a document that would reveal a secret capable of destroying everything Michael had spent his entire life building. Sarah noticed the briefcase first. "Dad, Michael forgot this." I looked toward the black leather case resting beside the sofa. It was still half open from when he'd pulled out the property transfer papers. Emily frowned. "We should call him." Sarah picked it up, intending to carry it to the door, but a folder slipped out and landed on the floor. The cover read, "Confidential." Sarah bent down to pick it up, but several pages slid free. One page caught my attention immediately. It had my full name at the top. My heart skipped a beat. Why does his business file have my name on it? Sarah slowly unfolded the document. As she read, the color drained from her face. "Dad, what is it?" She swallowed hard. "It says, your house has already been listed as an asset in Michael's company's financial statements." Emily stared in disbelief. "That's impossible. I never signed anything," I said. Sarah kept reading. "There are copies of property valuations, insurance documents, even photographs of the house." Emily covered her mouth. "How could he have all of this?" I suddenly remembered. 2 years earlier, Michael had insisted on updating family records for insurance purposes. I had trusted him completely and handed him copies of several documents. At the time, I hadn't thought twice about it. Now it all made sense. He hadn't collected those papers to help me. He had collected them because he planned to use my home one day. Sarah looked furious. I'm calling him. No, I said quietly. She looked at me in surprise. He'll only deny everything. But Dad, I want the truth first. Just then, my phone buzzed. It was an unknown number. I answered. Hello, a calm voice replied. Mr. Harrison, yes, my name is Daniel Brooks. I'm an attorney representing one of your son's former business partners. My stomach tightened. What about Michael? There are matters involving financial documents that include your property. We believe you may be an unwitting victim. The room became silent. I don't understand. I'm afraid I can't discuss everything over the phone. But I strongly recommend you do not sign any documents your son presents. I already refused. There was a pause. That may have saved your home. Those words sent chills through me. After ending the call, I told Sarah and Emily everything. Neither of them spoke for several moments. Finally, Sarah whispered, I don't think Michael came here because he wanted to help. Emily nodded sadly. I think he came because he was desperate. Across town, Michael stormed into the glass headquarters of his company. Employees avoided eye contact. Something was wrong. Very wrong. His assistant rushed toward him. Sir, the board is waiting. He entered the conference room. 6 directors sat around the polished table. No one smiled. The chairman folded his hands. Michael, we've discovered irregularities in the collateral documents submitted to the bank. Michael remained calm. There must be a misunderstanding. One of the directors slid a folder across the table. We've confirmed your father's property isn't legally pledged to the company. Michael didn't touch the folder. The chairman continued, if these documents were submitted without authorization, this could become a criminal matter. For the first time in years, Michael felt genuine fear. His empire, worth millions, was beginning to collapse. And for the first time, he realized that the one person who could save him was the father he had abandoned when he needed him most. Michael sat frozen. The boardroom, once a place where every voice waited for his approval, had become a courtroom. The chairman broke the silence. Michael, this is your last opportunity to explain. He cleared his throat. I never intended to harm anyone. One director leaned forward. Intent doesn't erase fraud. I was under pressure. So were thousands of honest business owners. They didn't submit assets they didn't own. The words struck harder than any insult. Michael had built his reputation on confidence. Now every person at the table looked at him with disappointment. Finally, the chairman spoke. Effective immediately, you're suspended as CEO pending an independent investigation. Michael stared in disbelief. You can't do this. We already have. His company phone, laptop, and security badge were placed on the table. Please leave. Meanwhile, I sat on the porch with Sarah as the evening sun dipped below the trees. For a while, neither of us spoke. Dad, Sarah said softly, do you still love him? I smiled sadly. You never stop loving your child. Even after everything, love and trust aren't the same thing. She nodded. I was so angry when he refused to help you. I was angry too. What changed? I looked at the fading sunlight. When you're lying in a hospital bed wondering if you'll wake up again, you realize hatred only steals the little time you have left. Sarah reached over and squeezed my hand. You always see the good in people. I try, but what if Michael doesn't deserve another chance? I thought for a long moment. Then that's his choice, not mine. The next morning, someone knocked on the door. Emily opened it. A young woman in her early 30s stood outside, holding a folder. My name is Rachel Collins. She looked nervous. I used to work as Michael's executive assistant. I invited her inside. She sat quietly before speaking. I resigned 3 weeks ago. Why? Sarah asked. Rachel lowered her eyes. Because I couldn't keep covering for him anymore. She opened the folder. Inside were emails, bank records, and internal company documents. I copied these before I left. My heart raced. What are they? Proof that your son's business has been struggling for nearly 2 years. Sarah looked shocked. But everyone says his company is worth millions. Rachel nodded. That's what everyone believes. She pointed to several reports. In reality, Michael kept borrowing more money to hide earlier losses. He was losing everything. Yes. And the $12 million deal. Rachel sighed. It was real. What happened? The investors discovered financial inconsistencies. So they walked away. Immediately. I closed my eyes. The day I had begged my son for help, he had already known his empire was crumbling. But instead of telling the truth, he'd chosen pride. Rachel hesitated before speaking again. There's something else. She handed me a sealed envelope. This was supposed to be delivered after your surgery. I slowly opened it. Inside was a handwritten letter. The handwriting belonged to Michael. It read, "Dad, if you're reading this, it means I waited too long. I kept telling myself I'd help after closing one more deal. Then another. Then another. Somewhere along the way, money became more important than people. I don't know how that happened. If I lose everything, I deserve it. But if you survive, I hope one day you'll understand that I was more afraid of failing than I was willing to admit. Michael." A tear rolled down my cheek. Sarah quietly looked away. Emily whispered, "He wrote this before everything fell apart." I folded the letter carefully. For the first time since our painful phone call, I realized something. Michael wasn't just losing his compin. He was losing himself. And he had known it all along. 3 days passed after Rachel's visit. Life settled into a quiet routine. Every morning, Sarah helped me walk a little farther down the driveway as part of my recovery. Emily prepared healthy meals, and my strength slowly began to return. But my mind kept returning to Michael's letter. I read it over and over. It didn't erase what he had done. It didn't erase the pain of hearing my own son say, "There's no money for you, Dad." Still, it reminded me that beneath the expensive suits and corporate titles was the little boy I had once carried on my shoulders. One rainy afternoon, my phone rang. It was Daniel Brooks, the attorney. "Mr. Harrison, we've received notice that your son has been summoned to appear before the Financial Crimes Division next week." I closed my eyes. Is he going to prison? That depends on the investigation. At this stage, we're trying to determine whether he knowingly submitted false collateral or whether someone else within the company manipulated the paperwork. So there's still hope. There is. But he needs evidence, and witnesses. After the call ended, Sarah looked at me. "You look worried." "I am. Because of Michael." I nodded. "He made terrible choices." She sighed. "I know. But prison won't heal this family." Before Sarah could respond, another knock echoed through the house. Emily opened the door. Michael stood there. This time, there was no luxury SUV. No designer watch. No polished confidence. He wore a simple jacket, jeans, and looked as though he hadn't slept in days. "Dad," he whispered, "I just need 5 minutes." Sarah crossed her arms. "You've already taken enough from him." Michael lowered his head. "I know." For several seconds, no one spoke. Finally, I stepped forward. "Come in." He entered slowly, looking around the familiar living room. Nothing had changed. The old clock still ticked on the wall. The family photos were still there. Only now, he seemed to notice them. His eyes rested on a picture of himself at 10 years old, proudly holding a fishing rod beside me. "I remember that day," he murmured. "You caught the smallest fish in the lake," I said with a faint smile. He managed a weak laugh. "And you told me it was the biggest because I caught it. You were proud. I believed you." His smile disappeared. "I wish I'd stayed that boy." Silence filled the room. Finally, Michael looked directly at me. "I'm sorry." The words were barely audible. "I should have answered your call." I said nothing. "I heard your voicemail dozens of times after the surgery." His voice cracked. I couldn't bring myself to delete it. Sarah remained guarded. "An apology doesn't change what happened." "I know." Michael reached into his backpack and placed a thick folder on the table. "I've signed my resignation." Emily looked surprised. "You resigned? I don't deserve to lead anyone." He pushed another document toward me. "I've also withdrawn every claim involving your house." I scanned the paperwork. Everything appeared legitimate. Then Michael took out one final envelope. "I sold my beach house this morning." "Why?" I asked. "The money belongs to you." He slid a cashier's check across the table. It was for $500,000. Everyone stared in shock. "I don't want it," I said. "You need it. My surgery is already paid for." "I know." "Then why?" His eyes filled with tears. "Because no amount of money can erase what I did, but it's a start." I slowly pushed the check back. What I wanted wasn't $500,000. I know. I wanted my son. Michael broke down. For years he had negotiated billion-dollar contracts without emotion. Now, sitting in his childhood home, he cried like the little boy who once believed his father could fix anything. Sarah quietly wiped away a tear of her own. The anger she'd carried since the hospital began to soften, not because Michael deserved forgiveness, but because, for the first time, he wasn't making excuses. He was accepting responsibility. Just then, another car pulled into the driveway. A black sedan. 2 people in business suits stepped out. Michael looked through the window and whispered, "They're here." "Who?" I asked. "The federal investigators." He stood up slowly. "I have to go with them." One investigator knocked gently on the front door. "Mr. Michael Harrison." Michael nodded. Before stepping outside, he turned back toward me. "If this is the last time I see you as a free man." He paused. "Thank you for loving me even when didn't deserve it." He walked toward the investigators without resistance. As the sedan disappeared down the road, I realized our family's greatest battle wasn't against cancer anymore. It was against the consequences of choices that had taken years to make, and would take even longer to heal. The doorbell rang just as the sun began to set. I opened the door and found a man in his early 50s standing on the porch. He wore a plain gray suit, carried a worn leather briefcase, and looked exhausted. "Mr. Harrison?" he asked politely. "Yes, my name is Thomas Reed. I worked with your son for almost 12 years. I invited him inside." Thomas looked around the living room before sitting down. "I owe you the truth," he said. Sarah and Emily exchanged nervous glances. "What truth?" I asked. Thomas sighed. "Michael wasn't always the man you've come to know." He opened his briefcase and placed several old photographs on the coffee table. One showed a much younger Michael standing beside employees at a food bank, serving meals with a smile. Another showed him visiting a children's hospital with boxes of toys. "He used to do this every month," Thomas said quietly. "No cameras, no reporters. He never wanted credit." Sarah frowned. "Then what changed?" Thomas hesitated. "Success." He looked down at his hands. "The company grew too fast. Investors demanded bigger profits every quarter. Michael stopped sleeping. He stopped seeing his family. Eventually, he believed that money could solve every problem." Emily shook her head sadly. "And when his business started failing, he hid it." "Why?" "Because he was terrified of disappointing the people who believed in him." Thomas reached into his briefcase one last time. "There is something you should have." He handed me a sealed envelope. "Michael gave this to me 6 months ago. He said, if anything ever happens to me, give this to my father." My hands trembled as I opened it. Inside was a handwritten letter. It began with only 4 words. The room fell silent as I unfolded Michael's letter. His handwriting was shaky, nothing like the neat signature I had seen on business contracts over the years. "Dad, if you're reading this, then I've probably run out of excuses. I spent years believing that success meant never looking weak. I chased bigger deals, larger offices, and headlines that called me a visionary. Somewhere along the way, I stopped being your son and became a man who measured everything in dollars. The worst day of my life wasn't when the company started collapsing. It was the day I heard your voicemail asking for help, and I convinced myself to call you back, tomorrow. Tomorrow came too late. I don't expect forgiveness. I only hope you'll believe that I never stopped loving you, even when I forgot how to show it. Michael." I folded the letter carefully and placed it back in the envelope. No one spoke. Finally, Thomas Reed broke the silence. "Mr. Harrison, there's one more thing you should know." I looked up. "The board has discovered evidence that the company's former chief financial officer transferred millions of dollars into secret accounts over the past 3 years. Michael ignored warning signs because he trusted him completely." "So Michael wasn't the mastermind?" Sarah asked. Thomas shook his head. "No, but he was responsible for failing to stop it. The difference mattered legally, but it didn't erase the pain our family had endured." Just then, my phone rang. It was Michael. His voice was calm but tired. "Dad, can we meet tomorrow?" I glanced at Sarah and Emily. "Where?" "At the lake. The old fishing lake." "Yes, the one we used to visit every summer." There was a long pause. "I'll be there," I said. The next morning, the sky was overcast as I arrived at the quiet lake. Michael was already sitting on the old wooden dock with 2 fishing rods lying beside him. For a moment, neither of us spoke. Then he smiled faintly. "I brought an extra rod." I sat beside him. "You remembered." "I've been remembering a lot lately." The water remained perfectly still. After several minutes, Michael finally said, "Do you remember what you told me the first time I lost a fish?" I smiled. "I told you there would always be another chance." He nodded slowly. "I wish life worked that way." "It doesn't," I replied. "But people can." Michael looked at me, confused. "People can choose what they become after they fail." His eyes filled with tears. I've failed as a businessman, and as a son. You've made serious mistakes. I don't deserve another chance. Maybe not, I said gently. But earning one starts with accepting responsibility. Michael lowered his head. I've agreed to cooperate with the investigators. I've turned over every document they asked for. I'm glad. I may lose everything. I placed a hand on his shoulder. You've already learned something more valuable than money. He looked at me. What? That success means nothing if there's no family waiting for you when you come home. For the first time in years, Michael didn't argue. He simply nodded. As we cast our fishing lines into the quiet water, it felt less like the end of a broken relationship, and more like the beginning of rebuilding one honest conversation at a time. 6 months later, the courtroom was filled with reporters, employees, and families waiting for the judge's decision. Michael stood quietly beside his attorney. He no longer looked like the confident CEO who had once measured life by profits and headlines. Months of investigations had changed him. He had cooperated fully, admitted his failures, and helped recover millions of dollars that had been hidden by the company's former chief financial officer. The judge reviewed the evidence carefully. Mr. Harrison, he began, your negligence caused serious financial harm. However, the court also recognizes your complete cooperation, restitution efforts, and assistance in exposing the primary fraud. The sentence was far lighter than many had expected. Michael closed his eyes with relief. Outside the courthouse, dozens of former employees gathered around him. One woman stepped forward. My husband kept his job because you helped the investigators recover the company, she said. Thank you. Michael lowered his head. I don't deserve your thanks. I only did what I should have done from the beginning. As he walked away, he noticed me waiting across the street. For a moment, neither of us spoke. Then he crossed the sidewalk and quietly asked, would you have lunch with me? I smiled. I'd like that. Over the following months, Michael sold nearly everything he owned. The luxury cars disappeared. The penthouse was gone. Expensive watches and designer suits were replaced by simple clothes. Instead of chasing billion-dollar deals, he accepted a modest position as a financial consultant for a nonprofit organization that helped struggling small businesses avoid the same mistakes he had made. Every Saturday morning, he came to my house. Sometimes we repaired the old fence. Sometimes we planted flowers with Emily. Sometimes Sarah joined us with her children, filling the backyard with laughter that had been missing for years. Trust didn't return overnight. It was rebuilt one small promise at a time. One afternoon, Michael handed me a small wooden box. I made this myself, he said. Inside was my old pocket watch, the one I thought had been lost years earlier. He had found it while cleaning storage boxes from my garage and spent weeks restoring it. I remembered how much Grandpa's watch meant to you, he said. I held it carefully. It still works. So does our family, I replied. Months later, my doctor smiled as he reviewed my latest test results. Everything looks excellent. You're cancer-free. I walked out of the clinic feeling lighter than I had in years. That evening, our entire family gathered for dinner. Before anyone started eating, Michael stood and raised a glass of sparkling cider. I used to believe success was measured by money, he said. I was wrong. Success is having people who still leave a chair for you at the table after you've made the biggest mistakes of your life. His voice broke. Dad, thank you for giving me the chance to become your son again. I stood and embraced him. I never stopped being your father. The room filled with tears, smiles, and quiet applause. Looking around the table, I realized something cancer had taught me. Money can buy comfort, but it cannot buy love. Wealth can build houses, but it cannot build a home. And forgiveness is not forgetting the past, it is choosing not to let the past decide the future. That night, as laughter echoed through the house, I looked at my children and grandchildren together. For the first time in a very long time, our family wasn't rich because of money. We were rich because we had found each other again. A year after my surgery, life looked very different. The scars on my body had faded, but the lessons remained. One Saturday morning, Sarah arrived early with my grandchildren. Their laughter filled the backyard as they chased one another across the grass. Emily smiled from the porch while preparing lemonade. A familiar pickup truck pulled into the driveway. Michael stepped out carrying a toolbox instead of a briefcase. I heard the fence still leans, he said with a shy smile. It does, I replied. Think you can fix it? I'd like to try. The two of us spent the afternoon replacing old wooden posts. We talked about everything we had avoided for years, my childhood, his dreams, the pressure he had placed on himself, and the mistakes that followed. I kept thinking I had to prove I was successful, Michael admitted. To whom? I asked. He paused. To everyone. And did it make you happy? He shook his head. No. I handed him another plank. Then maybe you were chasing the wrong prize. By sunset, the fence stood straight again. Michael looked at it proudly. It's not perfect. I smiled. Neither are families. The important thing is that we keep repairing them. Sarah walked over and wrapped an arm around her brother. Dinner's ready. For the first time in years, there was no tension between them. Just gratitude. As we gathered around the table, I silently thanked life for giving me one more chance, not simply to survive cancer, but to witness my family finding its way back to one another. Sometimes the greatest miracle isn't being saved from death. Sometimes it's watching broken hearts choose to heal. The following Monday, I received an unexpected invitation. It was from the local community center. They were hosting a charity fundraiser for cancer patients who couldn't afford treatment, and someone had nominated me as the guest speaker. At first, I wanted to decline. I've never given a speech, I told Sarah. She smiled. You don't have to be a speaker. Just tell your story. That evening, the auditorium was filled with families, doctors, nurses, and survivors. When my name was called, I slowly walked onto the stage. For a moment, I simply looked at the audience. Then I began. A year ago, I believed I was fighting cancer. I was wrong. Cancer was only one battle. The harder battle was learning that the people you love can disappoint you, and deciding whether you'll let that disappointment define your life. The room became silent. I called my son because I needed help. He said no. My daughter gave everything she could. I thought my family had been broken forever. I paused. But life has a strange way of giving people one more chance. As I finished speaking, the audience stood and applauded. When I stepped off the stage, I noticed Michael standing quietly near the back of the room. He hadn't told anyone he was coming. I hope you don't mind, he said. I wanted to hear you. I smiled. I'm glad you came. Just then, the event organizer approached us. Mr. Harrison, someone has made an anonymous donation. How much? I asked. She looked at the paper in disbelief. $320,000. The donation would pay for surgeries, medications, and transportation for dozens of patients. Who donated it? Sarah asked. The organizer smiled. They asked to remain anonymous. She walked away. I looked at Michael. He avoided my eyes. You did this, didn't you? He shrugged gently. I sold the last investment property I owned. You didn't have to. I know. Then why? He looked across the room at families embracing one another. Because I finally understand something. What? The day you asked me for $3,200, I thought protecting my wealth would protect my future. He shook his head. I was wrong. What protects our future is the way we treat the people who need us most. I placed my hand on his shoulder. I've waited a long time to hear you say that. For the first time in years, there was no guilt between us. Only honesty. As we walked out of the community center together, Sarah slipped her arm through mine while Michael walked on my other side. The night air was cool, and the parking lot echoed with laughter from families heading home. I looked at my children and smiled. Cancer had taken my strength for a while. Greed had nearly taken my family forever. But love, patience, and the courage to admit mistakes had given me something far more valuable than money. They had given me my family back. A few weeks after the fundraiser, life settled into a rhythm I hadn't experienced in years. Every Sunday, our family gathered for dinner. There was no luxury dining room, no expensive catering, and no business conversations. Just homemade food, laughter, and time together. One afternoon, Michael arrived earlier than usual. He carried a small cardboard box. Dad, he said, I found these while cleaning out my storage unit. Inside were old family photo albums. Sarah carefully opened the first one. There we were, 25 years younger, standing in front of our first house. Michael was holding a baseball glove, while Sarah clutched a stuffed teddy bear. Emily smiled through tears. I thought these were lost forever. Michael looked down. So did I. For the next hour, we laughed at old hairstyles, childhood birthdays, and family vacations. It felt as though the years of pain had quietly stepped aside, making room for happier memories. Then, Michael became serious. I've accepted a new job. Sarah looked surprised. What kind of job? I'm teaching financial responsibility at a nonprofit organization. She smiled. So you're helping people avoid the mistakes you made? He nodded. Exactly. A few months later, I received another call from my doctor. Routine tests confirmed what I had hoped to hear. Everything still looks excellent, he said. Keep taking care of yourself. When I left the clinic, I didn't drive home immediately. Instead, I stopped at the old lake. The same dock, the same quiet water. A few minutes later, another car pulled up. Michael stepped out, carrying 2 fishing rods. I figured I'd find you here. I laughed. You know me too well. We sat together in comfortable silence. After casting our lines, Michael spoke. Dad, if you could erase everything that happened, would you? I thought carefully before answering. No. He looked surprised. Why not? Because if none of it had happened, neither of us would have learned what truly matters. He nodded slowly. I spent years trying to build a fortune. And now I'm trying to build a life. As the sun began to set, I looked across the lake and realized that healing isn't a single moment. It's a choice we make again and again. My illness had tested my body. My son's ambition had tested our family. But forgiveness had restored something neither medicine nor money ever could. For the first time in a long time, I wasn't thinking about what we had lost. I was grateful for everything we still had. Winter arrived sooner than expected. The first snowfall covered the yard in white, and for the first time in years, our home felt warm in every sense of the word. One evening, Sarah called with exciting news. Dad, can everyone come over tomorrow? Of course, I replied. Is everything all right? She laughed. Better than all right. The next afternoon, the entire family gathered at her house. Emily squeezed my hand as we walked inside. Michael was already there, helping set the table. A year earlier, I never would have imagined seeing him and Sarah laughing together in the same kitchen. Sarah tapped a spoon against her glass. I have an announcement. The room fell silent. She smiled through happy tears. I'm going to be a mom again. Cheers filled the room. Emily hugged her first. Then Michael wrapped his sister in a long embrace. I'm so happy for you, he whispered. She smiled. I want this baby to grow up knowing what family really means. Later that evening, Michael joined me on the back porch. Snowflakes drifted quietly through the air. I've been thinking, he said. About what? About starting a foundation. I looked at him. A foundation? He nodded. In your name. I chuckled. I don't need my name on a building. It won't be. He smiled. It'll be called Second Chance Fund. What will it do? It'll help people who can't afford life-saving medical treatment. For a moment, I couldn't speak. He continued, no family should ever have to choose between paying bills and saving someone they love. I placed a hand on his shoulder. That would mean more to me than any inheritance. Over the next several months, Michael worked tirelessly. Local businesses donated money. Doctors volunteered their time. Former employees who had once blamed him returned, not because they had forgotten the past, but because they believed in the future he was trying to build. By the end of the year, the foundation had helped dozens of patients receive treatment they otherwise could not afford. One afternoon, a young father approached Michael after a charity event. My wife got her surgery because of this foundation, he said, holding back tears. You gave my children more time with their mother. Michael didn't know what to say. He simply shook the man's hand. As we drove home, he stared quietly out the window. I finally understand something, Dad. What is it? The greatest investment isn't in companies. It's in people. I smiled. Now you sound like the son I always hoped you'd become. He looked at me with grateful eyes. Thank you for never giving up on me. I looked out at the road ahead. Life had tested us with illness, pride, heartbreak, and loss. But in the end, it also gave us something precious, the chance to rebuild what mattered most. And sometimes, that is the greatest miracle of all. Great. Since I can't continue the same long story indefinitely, here's a new original family drama story idea with the same emotional, YouTube-style feel that you can use as your next video. Title: My brothers sold Dad's house while he was in the hospital. They never expected his final will. Story premise: after suffering a heart attack, 72-year-old Arthur is rushed to the hospital. Believing he won't survive, his 2 wealthy sons secretly sell his family home without his permission, planning to divide the money before he dies. Their younger sister, who works as a school teacher, discovers the betrayal and spends her own savings to stop the sale. Arthur survives and returns home, only to learn what his children have done. He says nothing. Weeks later, the family gathers at the lawyer's office to hear Arthur's final will. The 2 sons arrive expecting millions. Instead, they discover that months before his heart attack, Arthur had quietly transferred most of his estate into a family trust dedicated to helping veterans and children in need. His daughter is named trustee, not because she is his favorite, but because she was the only one who protected the family's values instead of chasing its wealth. The brothers leave with very little money but a painful lesson: an inheritance is earned through character, not demanded by blood. Years later, they reconcile with their sister and begin volunteering for the foundation their father created, finally understanding the legacy he truly wanted to leave behind. This premise has strong emotional hooks, family conflict, betrayal, suspense, and a satisfying ending, well suited to long-form YouTube storytelling.